Currently, I'm not tied to any Webtoon project. Well, there is one, but it's still uncertain. So, while waiting for confirmation, and since I have some free time, I decided to remake a comic I created before. Why am I remaking it? Simply to improve the quality of the artwork. If you're curious about my latest project, you can now read it on Webtoon because the English version has been released. Lock Me Up, Duke. I worked as one of the colorists for this Webtoon, starting from Season 2. Since the currently released episodes are still from Season 1, my work hasn't appeared yet. But since I was involved in the project, I already know the entire storyline from start to finish. Since I've had experience working as a professional Webtoon creator, I realized some aspects were lacking in the comic I made before. That's why I decided to remake it, to make it look more epic. The Webtoon I previously worked on had a royal theme, which required a lot of intricate details in both drawing and coloring, making it very time-consuming. Because of that, returning to my old comic with a school life theme feels refreshing. There aren't as many details, and I think the coloring process is much simpler, too. Honestly, I'm confused about you guys. Why are you so eager to become Webtoon creators under this kind of industry system? Completing one episode per week with 60 to 80 panels is no joke. Not to mention the highly detailed coloring. Even I feel exhausted while working on it. Therefore, my advice is this. If you truly want to go professional, be prepared to sacrifice your sleep, because I'm sure you'll get very little of it. However, if you're doing it just as a hobby, then simply enjoy the process. Just like what I'm doing now, this comic is mine, for me, and made by me. I enjoy it much more because the responsibility is lighter. That doesn't mean I can just make it carelessly, but I have the freedom to experiment as much as I want without worrying about what the editor will say later. Honestly, I feel a bit lazy about recording the line art process because it slows down my workflow. This one page took me about 1 hour and 20 minutes to finish. Without recording, I'm sure I could complete it faster since my computer wouldn't lag. I actually wanted to share some tips about the line art process, but I feel like most people already know how to do it, so I'm not sure what tips would be useful. That said, one important thing I can share is to use a vector layer for your line art. For the sake of efficiency and making your work easier, using a vector layer allows for smoother transformations and erasing of lines, making the process much more convenient. And did you know, the Webtoon I worked on before had 3 different artists just for the line art alone. Yes, a single Webtoon can have 3 different people handling the line art. There's a main artist who draws highly detailed panels, another artist responsible for drawing characters in other panels, and someone else dedicated to drawing animals and monsters. 3 different roles handled by 3 different people. That's why you shouldn't be surprised that industrial Webtoons can have such detailed artwork and coloring while still releasing new episodes every week. And most importantly, don't compare your work to studio-produced Webtoons, especially if you're making it alone. Also, if you want to enter the professional world, study various art styles from different manhwa. In a studio setting, you'll be required to follow the studio's standards. If your drawing style is different from theirs, like it or not, you'll have to adapt and match the style they require. A little personal rant. I actually enjoy making line art much more, but for some reason, every studio project I've worked on has always offered me a colorist position. On top of that, my usual coloring technique is often different from what the studio expects. That's why it takes time to adapt, and little by little, I've gotten used to following their style, to the point where I've started losing some of my own usual habits in my artwork. That's why I feel confused about how to color my artwork the way I used to. It feels so different now. like I've lost my artistic identity. In the video I made earlier, someone commented asking for a tutorial on how to create backgrounds in SketchUp. I plan to make it, but right now, I haven't thought of creating a new background design that would be needed for my Webtoon. Maybe I'll make it if I need a 3D model for the background. Actually, I studied civil engineering, so I'm quite familiar with structural design applications like AutoCAD, SketchUp, and Revit. But during college, the professors only asked us to create models without teaching us how to use the software. So, I don't know, it feels pointless to study there when, in the end, I have to find the knowledge on my own. Well, I ended up learning the software I mentioned earlier through YouTube tutorials because my professors didn't provide any tutorials at all. Creating 3D models in SketchUp is a bit tricky because I still need to design the floor plan, not to mention thinking about the interior design as well. So I might make that video once I have an idea of what new background needs to be created for my Webtoon. And once the floor plan is done, I'll start making it right away. By the way, this time I'm drawing shoes. I often see some Webtoons that, for some reason, use 3D shoe models, but leave them as they are in 3D. So, of course, there's a noticeable difference between the drawn characters and the shoes that remain in 3D. I know the reason is definitely because of tight deadlines, but why not put in a little more effort to draw the shoes manually, or at least outline the 3D shoes they use? Even though I make Webtoons, as a reader, I also find it a bit distracting when 3D assets are left as they are and directly interact with the characters. Maybe I could share some tips on how to easily convert 3D objects into line art later. You can check out how I transformed a 3D book model into 2D using the available features in Clip Studio. Drawing shoes, especially if they have intricate details, does take a bit more effort. Not to mention if it's just for a single scene that readers will simply scroll past. It's a bit unfortunate, isn't it? We put effort into every panel, but in the end, it only gets looked at for a few seconds before readers move on to the next one. That's why I recommend drawing highly detailed elements only for important panels that have a significant impact. For other panels, just draw them well enough to look good and be visually appealing. Next, I'll be drawing background characters. When creating a Webtoon, you'll often need to design characters who only appear occasionally and weren't planned in the initial character design. Because of this, we sometimes experience art block, wondering what kind of character to draw, how they should look, or what color palette to use. Honestly, there's no need to overthink it or take it too seriously. Just create characters that are easiest for you to draw. You don't even need to detail their faces, as that might accidentally shift the reader's focus toward them instead. Don't make them stand out too much by giving them a color palette that's drastically different from the main characters, as it will completely shift the reader's focus toward them. So, when creating background characters, make them look as ordinary as possible, almost as if they're truly unimportant. This is for the sake of your main characters, ensuring that the spotlight isn't stolen by side characters. This time, besides not drawing detailed faces, I'm also skipping the details on their fingers. This is because of the distant camera point of view and a crowded panel. If you have a busy panel with more than 2 characters and a far camera angle, you can reduce details like this to make the drawing process easier and avoid unnecessary difficulties. Oh yeah, some of you might think that you can only start making comics once you're good at drawing. But actually, you can create comics even while you're still learning to draw. Why? Because, in my opinion, instead of practicing gestures separately, you can learn gestures by making comics. This way, your skills will improve much faster since you're constantly forced to create different poses in each panel. That's how I learned too. I picked up proportions as I worked on each Webtoon panel. Since I don't really enjoy making standalone artworks, I prefer creating comics with the same characters in various poses. Plus, making comics has its own charm because you can add dialogue to tell a story, making the process even more engaging. In the process of drawing your comic, you'll also get plenty of chances to draw hands and fingers, something many people tend to avoid. You can no longer hide your character's hands in their pockets because you'll need to draw them clearly to properly convey the story in each panel. That's why creating comics is a great way to improve your drawing skills. You'll be forced to draw angles and poses that you might not usually attempt in standalone illustrations. It's a fun and effective way to push your skills further. When creating a comic, don't fill every panel with just the characters' faces. Imagine yourself as a director orchestrating a film. Webtoon creators should think the same way. You need to consider how each line of the script will be visually presented in each panel. What expressions should the characters show? Which part of the scene is most important to highlight? What's the best camera angle to use? Think about these carefully, just like a film director would. This page is almost complete. Now, I'll be drawing a panel with quite a lot of detail. I'll position the camera as if it's inside a bookshelf, making it look like Claire is framed between several books. I really like this scene because it feels different from the other panels. And of course, it's more complicated to draw. Since there's a foreground and a background, I'll separate the line art layers. To keep the focus on Claire, the foreground will be blurred later. Oh, by the way, Claire's characterization here is intentionally emotionless. So it's not that I'm not drawing her expressions well, she's just designed to be that way. Like a robot without emotions. This is necessary for the story's progression. So if you've noticed that her expressions have been flat all this time, it's because I deliberately made her that way. By the way, did you see how easily I converted a 3D object into 2D? I used the artistic effect feature in Clip Studio. With just one click, the 3D object instantly transforms into an outline. The story of Hexagon is quite full of tragedy, so all the characters have rather dark backstories, including Claire. Her emotionless nature also has a reason behind it, which will play a crucial role in her character development later on. Speaking of tragedy, I've been reading a lot of tragic webtoons lately, where the female leads always suffer at the hands of the male leads. The same template keeps repeating. They go through regression and then end up with a happy ending alongside the very men who once hurt them. Honestly, I just can't read stories like that. Maybe I'm just not a forgiving person. It frustrates me when characters are written as if they've completely forgotten what was done to them and why they suffered in the past. They're made to act like it never happened. And that's the part I really don't like. If that happened to me, I would never meet the person who hurt me again. Rather than going through the trouble of seeking revenge, only to have it end in failure, I'd rather just distance myself and forget about them. The best revenge is treating them as if they don't exist. This panel is almost done. You can start imagining what it will look like once it's fully colored, right? It's a bit unfortunate though. After putting effort into drawing detailed characters, we sometimes have to erase parts of them because they'll be covered by other objects. But at least by using the vector layer, the erasing process becomes much easier. Finally, this page is complete. And at last, a male main character has appeared. In my opinion, I actually prefer drawing male characters because in terms of proportions and hairstyles, they're much easier to draw than female characters. However, if a male character has long hair and a more delicate appearance, then I find them just as difficult to draw as female characters. I personally enjoy drawing short hair and masculine body proportions more than drawing female characters, who often have long hair and more complex body curves. It just feels less complicated to me. I guess that's it for today's video, where I showed my line art process. Thank you for watching.